we know that Black history is America's history. Although sometimes in this country it's not treated that way, looking at you, Florida, and all the other states that plan to follow the warp line of thinking of desanctimonious. But let me get back. This country would not be the hegemonic nation that it is without the contribution, sometimes by force, of Africans and then their African American descendants. The vibrancy of this nation, the vitality of this nation wouldn't be quite the same without us. And in an opinion piece for Yes Magazine, Lonnie G. Bunch III, the 14th Secretary of the Smithsonian, gives an overview in an op-ed piece about the genesis of Black History Month and why it still matters. And he really made some strong points that I agree with. So let's go ahead and walk down memory lane with Secretary Bunch III, shall we? Yeah, we shall. So no one has played a greater role in helping all Americans know the Black past than Carter G. Woodson, and that's Dr. Carter G. Woodson, the individual who created Negro History Week in Washington, D.C. in February of 1926. Bunch goes on to say that Woodson was the second Black American to receive a PhD in history from Harvard, following the one and only Dr. W.e.b. Du Bois by a few years. To Woodson, the Black experience was too important simply to be left to a small group of academics. Woodson believed that his role was to use Black history and culture as a weapon in the struggle for racial uplift. You better say that. His impatience. So Dr. Carter G. Woodson was impatient with the pace by which these kinds of the teaching of Black history was going, and it was his impatience that led him to create Negro History Week in 1926 to ensure that school children, God forbid the sanctimonious was around, school children would be exposed to Black history. Woodson chose the second week of February to celebrate Black history because of the birthdays of Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. And Jackson, I kind of want to pause right there and bring you in because there's an inside joke, as you probably know, in the Black community about why February is one of the coldest months of the year, especially if you live in the northern parts of this nation. It's the shortest month of the year. And so constantly I would hear the jokes of why was it February? And that there was some kind of conspiracy to pick February. But as we know, many of us knew this, but for some who never knew this, it is because Dr. Carter G. Woodson admired both the abolitionist Frederick Douglass and a former president Abraham Lincoln so much, and both of their birthdays are in February. That is the reason why he picked February.
Well, I guess we get a leap year sometimes, so a little we get a little sprinkle on top, hit the pinata every once in a while, every 4 years. But I think one of the biggest things about Black history is how without it, there would be no America. And oftentimes, if not all the time, the legend and the mythology of America is that this is a place, let alone all the people who were here before, but just how it was built through grit and entrepreneurship. But, those early entrepreneurs were slave masters. Land was taken, speculated upon, just like it is with the stock market these days. You can grow this there, you can grow that there. And really the glue that held the United States together was slavery. A lot of what kept it going on for so long is because it was so important politically that the thought of getting rid of it just was complete political suicide. Slaves were marched around even after the Atlantic slave trade was ended. Slaves were marched like cattle to and from, ripped from their families. And really it was just automation, basically. They didn't have to pay people. That's why their profits were so high. But outside of that, the inventions, the inclusion, and all the different industries, just how Black history is American history. I mean, and then you said, well, thank God Ron DeSanctimonious or the Satan or whatever it is, whatever you want to call him. Thank God he isn't around. But at the same time, it's like, what picture are we painting now? We don't have to talk about critical race theory, even though we kind of really don't in school. But the Black history is American history, and there's no erasing it.
That's exactly right. Cannot erase it. And there is a book that I would definitely love to recommend to our viewers, and it's called They Came Before Columbus. A lot of times in the study of our history, as you know, Jackson, people always start at chattel slavery. It left a horrible imprint, no doubt, on this nation. And that was the beginning in terms of the formation of this nation. And there is no way around talking about the enslavement of our ancestors and then their progeny. There's a whole lot of Black history when we talk about the Black diaspora and all of the Black people in various parts of this globe, the exploration of Black people, throughout this world, even before they came before Columbus really lays that out so well. The different kingdoms on the continent of Africa to the origins from the western coast of Africa, where most African Americans' ancestors come from. So it is a lot. And when I taught African American history, I made sure that I started on, in Africa, on the west coast of Africa, and worked my way to the Americas, because there's more than one America. But when we think about the United States of America, and Jackson, you made such an important point that slavery, the enslavement of Black people, of Africans and then their ancestors, was so important to the people, to the Europeans, the Anglo-Saxons that formed this nation, that even as they fought for their own freedom from the British crown, they had the opportunity to let freedom ring in a deep, beautiful way. And they decided not to. They decided to keep our ancestors enslaved, even as they fought for their own freedom against the British crown. The irony there is not lost on us. And even when slavery was abolished by the 13th Amendment, which we call the Civil War amendments, even still, there is a clause in there that we debate right now. The 13th was a good documentary that people should watch that talks about how even in that, slavery, a type of slavery, is still very much alive and well in this country, and it's called the industrial prison complex. But just in the fact that Black people were set free, so to speak, by the 13th Amendment, and then the 14th Amendment and the 15th Amendments of the Constitution, equal protection under the law, and then the 15th Amendment giving Black men the right to vote. And we still needed the Civil Rights. We still need the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act even after all of that. So the history is vast, and just the music and the culture and the arts and all of that, because it is about pain, but it is also about enlivenment and vibrancy that Black people brought. The whole notion of the blues, which is the combination of African and American history. We wouldn't know the blues, we wouldn't know jazz, any of that. None of that would have been born without those whose skin have been kissed by the sun, as Zora Neale Hurston lays out, the great writer. So it is vast. And just big ups to Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who started the week. That week turned into a month. I believe that was in the 70s when it became Black History Month, but he had a vision to do that. And it is important, as going back to what Secretary Bunch III had to say, it is important to realize that Negro History Week was not born in a vacuum. The 1920s saw the rise in interest in African American culture that was represented by the Harlem Renaissance. Renaissance, as we know, means rebirth. I kind of, as a historian, I'm not so sure I would have used the word Renaissance, because rebirth means that there was something there all along. We had to really create that thing right here in the United States of America. The cultural interpreters that Bunch lays out in his op-ed, he says they wrote about the joys and the sorrows of Blackness, that they captured the new rhythms of the cities, created in part by the thousands of Black Southerners who migrated to urban centers like Chicago, like Cleveland, don't leave out Cleveland. And they created images that celebrated Blackness and provided more positive images of the African American experience. And then he goes on to list some of those folks, and this is not an exhaustive list by any stretch of the imagination. We got the one and only Langston Hughes, we have Georgia Douglas Johnson, Claude McKay, Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, Jimmy Lansford, Aaron Douglas, Richmond Birth, and Lois Jones, just to name a few. And Jackson, I really love how he points to, yes, the pleasure and the pain, the beauty of what it means to be Black in America, and how we had writers and artists, both visual artists, artists, spoken word artists just really lay into really elevating what Black history really does mean, and for us to be able to tell it through our voice. That is really what the Harlem Renaissance was about. No longer were other people telling our stories. We had the opportunity to tell them for ourselves.
Absolutely, 100%. And I think that, well, it's good that we have a month, but I think that moving forward, especially living in the times that we do, where we have access to so much content, there's going to be a lot more opportunity to just educate people on the Black experience of all kinds. Upper class, lower class, back in the day, where the Black community's going, interracial relationships, all types of things, realities that happen in and out of the Black community. And also, again, just really painting that picture that this whole country has always and still continues to depend on Black people very thoroughly.
There it is, that part right there. And that Black history is in fact America's history. Secretary Lonnie Bunch III, he wraps his op-ed up with just a personal touch as he reflects on why it is important to continue to study and recognize Black History Month. And he said the following: rather, I see the African American past in the way my daughters laugh reminds me of my grandmother. I experience the African American past when I think of my grandfather choosing to leave the South rather than continue to experience sharecropping and segregation, or when I remember sitting in the backyard listening to old men tell stories. It just brings a smile to my face. Further, he goes on, ultimately, African American history and its celebration throughout February is just as vibrant today as it was when Woodson created it 94 years ago. That's because it helps us to remember there is no more powerful force than a people steeped in their history. And there is no more higher cause than honoring our struggle and ancestors by remembering. You better go ahead and say that. Amen, Secretary Bunch III. You did that. We remember the history of our ancestors because we must understand the past, and we must understand, in the words of James Baldwin, from whence we came. We remember it for ourselves because we use it to strengthen and undergird this journey called life that we are all experiencing in this moment, and we need to wrap and understand it for future generations yet unborn. Wishing each and every Black person, every person whose skin has been kissed by the sun, a very happy African American or Black History Month indeed. Oh my God, Jackson, I'm telling you, I can just talk about this. I mean, I'm feeling like I'm back in my college classroom right now.
Right, exactly. I'm ready to just not say nothing and just let you take over the whole episode. We can just talk about history and facts. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
definitely. Absolutely.
Oh my God, it's a beautiful thing. I mean, even with the pain that we have endured as a people and that we continue to endure today, it is a beautiful thing. I mean, to say it loud, I'm Black and I'm proud, and to recognize the beauty and the magnificence of Blackness is indeed a beautiful thing. And you're right, Jackson, we can do a 365. Yeah, we can. And we should.